I ended up, this one book was just really like nagging me. There was this one book on Amazon constantly being like recommended. And so I bought it and I read it, and it was just, I'm just kind of making a long story very short. And that opened up an inquiry as to, like, it was the first time in my life that I started asking myself, what do I actually want? Where am I actually going? Because I realized I never asked myself this question really, that I was kind of living on autopilot. And that's how I started working with the Michael that you asked me about. And that led to my first shift. But even then, Rick, I never considered the first shift an awakening. To me, it was just I refer to it as a fundamental shift in perception. That's it. I never seen it as a spiritual event, and I've never seen it as, therefore now I'm an awakened spiritual person. Not at all. So I first want to say something that you mentioned, that like absolutely it wasn't like random. So even though I didn't have a spiritual practice of any kind, and I have never meditated in my life or had spiritual practice, but one could say that the inquiry that I did with the mentor that I was working, because he wasn't a spiritual teacher, he was a coach, right? He was a transformative coach. And the only thing he was pointing to all the time was the nature of thought. And to look prior to any thought, to look in the direction prior to any thought, right?
Yeah.
And the other thing that he was pointing to was that there's basically this wholeness, that we're inherently whole, and that when we see into the nature or beyond the thought, we discover this inherent wholeness, right? So really, that's what he was trying to point me to during our conversations. We talked about other things, but this was a kind of an inquiry. So, okay, we may not call it strictly spiritual practice, but I would say now in retrospect, it was a kind of a inquiry, it was a kind of a profound inquiry into the nature of thought and basically what would my experience of life be like without any thought. I could sense that he was pointing to something that was absolutely true in a non-intellectual way. And all I had was my intellect to rely on, and it wasn't getting me there, So I was really annoyed. I was really frustrated because I kind of knew what he was saying, but I wasn't really getting it, which is what I would put as the difference between basically the intellectual understanding and an insight, or a direct insight, something like that. So I was incredibly frustrated because I was hitting the wall. Basically, my brain was just was failing me, and that was really annoying, and so. I could understand it already. Like, come on, and the more I tried to, like, the more I, pushed, the more confusing the whole thing was getting. So by the time I ended up in Arizona, I kind of gave up on trying to understand it. I was so exhausted by this inquiry that I kind of gave up for a moment and went to this like workshop that was not related to that inquiry with him. And we were chatting over lunch about something completely unrelated. And all of a sudden, basically in a split second, like I said, my perception shifts so fundamentally that I'm just seeing life without thought for the first time in my life. And and all of a sudden, all my problems that were still there and all this pressure to fix things and work on things and fix that and get rid of that, like all that urgency that was there prior, it was just gone. It was nothing looked like a problem anymore. It wasn't a denial, by the way. It wasn't like I went into some kind of denial place. The circumstances of my life were still there as they were before that insight, but nothing looked problematic. Nothing looked burdensome anymore. And that's when that experience of peace with capital P that I had a glimpse of for the first time as a teenager kind of emerged fully.